Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today we got news about series drops, the return of series drops. Yes, they are finally happening shortly into the new year. So the next patch, scheduled for January 9th, is going to be introducing the first series drops we've had in well over half a year. And we have the full list of cards that are going to be downgrading here. So let's go over them real quick. Cards moving from Series 5 down to Series 4 include Howard the Duck, Kitty Pryde, Echo, Ghost Spider, Hitmonkey, Dakin, Phoenix Force, Silver Samurai, and Lady Deathstrike. And the cards that are making their way from Series 4 to Series 3 are Master Mold, Negasonic, Spider-Man 2099, Stegron, and Stature. So yeah, that's a lot of cards that are going to be dropping down this next patch. However, taking a look at these cards, I think it becomes very clear that these aren't exactly the most sought-after cards of the bunch. In fact, if we're looking at this list through a meta angle, through the what's kind of popular and viable right now, truthfully, I think there are really only 3, maybe 4 if you're being generous, cards here that are actually seeing, I'd say, fringe meta play. I don't think any of these cards are actually relevant in a very well-performing meta deck. You could make an argument for Phoenix Force after the buff. I actually really like that deck, but it has been pretty much nowhere on ladder, though it probably isn't helped with the increase of Professor X around getting in the way of it moving. But yeah, these cards aren't really the most viable or played cards right now, and that is no coincidence. When we first got the announcement that series drops were being halted, it came with a lot of animosity from the community because a lot of people had been given the advice of, hey, Darkhawk and Null are dropping soon. These are very powerful and sought after cards for very specific archetypes, and you should just wait a little bit longer because you've already waited this long. They'll drop. You'll get the card for free if you are Series 3 complete. Then, when they were supposed to drop, it didn't happen. A lot of people were mad. And then we found out about the Spotlight system shortly after, and it was very clear they were trying to hold those cards back from dropping because they needed stuff to entice people to open the Spotlight caches. Now, this is something I directly called out when it happened. It felt very clearly that they were trying to limit the cards that they knew they were powerful and sought after into these Spotlight caches to make them more appealing. I actually got a lot of flack for that take back when it happened. Some people thought it was even conspiracy-level territory, which is honestly hilarious to me. But no, shortly before the announcement happened, we had a chance to ask some questions about the series drops, and one of the answers we got here is, yes, confirmation. There is no coincidence here that the cards dropping here are not, the most powerful or sought-after cards of the bunch. It's not a coincidence that they want the more sought-after cards to remain in Spotlight caches because they want to entice people to open those Spotlight caches. It's not a conspiracy. It's not a coincidence. That's just how it is. And that's how I expect it to remain for the foreseeable future. Now, it's not something I'm particularly a fan of, but I'm not really the person who's affected by series drops to begin with. So this was never really my big battle to fight. I do feel for the people who are going to be upset about this. I think it's really unfortunate that they are gating cards that are more sought after behind the spotlights, but from other stuff we've seen from the company, this is really not a surprising action to me. And then the next question that people probably are going to be asking here that wasn't posted in the blog, but we did get a little bit of an answer on is, are series drops going to be occurring regularly? There is no set cadence for how series drops are going to happen. We did get confirmation that there are going to be more series drops throughout the new year. Basically, the goal of series drops is that they are trying to drop down a handful of cards all at once to create more opportunities to play with cards people may not yet own. And looking at the cards listed here, I'm sure a lot of people don't own these cards. So if you're a more casual player who just likes to mess around and doesn't really care about being very competitive with the game, this is probably fine for you. Maybe you can try out Master Mold Ronin or Negasonic and Cerebro 2 or some weird bad 2099 move list. I am happy for the players who are going to enjoy this, but if you're one of the people who's been holding out on buying a very meta staple card like Zabu or Darkhawk or MODOK, I think this announcement basically is a hard confirmation that, at least for the foreseeable future, if you want those cards, you either need to pony up the tokens or get them in the spotlights, because it seems like they will not be dropping as long as they are a more desirable card that can be used to push the spotlight system. One thing we haven't got an answer on yet that I'm curious to see how it plays out is what's going to happen with the Spotlight variants for some of these cards that released in Spotlight caches but are now Series 3, like the ones we have here with Master Mold, Negasonic, Spider-Man, Stegron, and Stature. I think all of these except Master Mold did have a Spotlight, and if you remember back when they first announced the Spotlight system, they said, yes, eventually Spotlight variants will be obtainable through other means. I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, as I think they don't want to devalue that artificial scarcity of, oh hey, I got this thing from the Spotlight variant, it's going to take a really long time or be really difficult for someone else to get it after the fact, because then you'll probably just have people waiting out those Spotlight variants who would otherwise get them when they release. Now, one thing I would really like to see happen here is I would love if we could see either some buffs or even in the opposite direction nerfs to kind of open up the playing field a bit so that with these cards dropping, there's more reason to actually play them. A great example here I think is Master Mold. Master Mold very clearly was designed for like the Ronin style deck. I've tried playing it. It does very, very poorly. And I don't even think it's because Master Mold is necessarily such a bad card. It's more because the payoff and the other ways of doing what the deck is trying to do of increasing your opponent's hand size just don't really exist. They've talked about doing a Ronin buff a long time ago. Maybe that's something we'll see in the near future and it could help it out a lot, but that's something I'd really like to see. Negasonic was a good example, even though she's not the most played card. The change to Negasonic we got in the past did result in her seeing a ton more play and experimentation, and you do still occasionally run into her, and when that happens, it's definitely a card that takes you off guard a lot of the time. So I would love to see some changes like that be made. Spider-Man 2099 is a big one where that card has just been really, really awful since it came out, so that's one I would really love to see get some love. A lot of the other cards here are actually fairly decent cards. I think like Phoenix Force, Silver Samurai, Dakin, Ghost Spider, Hitmonkey. I think these are all not bad cards. It's just that the power level of the environment we're in right now is just a lot higher, it feels like, than these cards can realistically keep up with. I don't think that's because these are bad cards, it's just other cards are just doing things so much better. Echo is even starting to see some play during the Miss Marvel meta last month as a way to counteract that effect, or making it so your opponent couldn't play your Miss Marvel or Professor X in a given lane. Kitty Pryde got a buff recently, and she has been experimented with a little bit more, though I definitely wouldn't mind seeing her get, maybe one more point of power returned. And then Stature. Stature's one where they nerfed Stature and Black Bolt preemptively before Silver Samurai came out, because that was a really top performing deck at the time, but since then decks have gotten a lot more powerful, and I think it wouldn't be the end of the world if we ended up seeing the dynamic duo here get their 1 point of power back each to help them compete with some of the other stuff going on right now. And one last thing I do want to mention here is the concept of Series 3 Bloat. So we're having 5 new cards being added to Series 3, and they're not the greatest cards in the world, especially if you happen to lack the other appropriate series cards to pair with them, namely Stature, but this also applies to things like 2099, who's a lot worse if you don't have Ghost Spider. But basically, the thing that I think is a little bit concerning here is we need some kind of solution for this endless bloat that is going to happen to Series 3. Series 3 has gotten bigger and bigger. I think now you are completing Series 3 around the 4,500 collection level mark, which is really, really high, and putting more cards like this that aren't super sought after in there that players might be getting instead of, one of the Series 3 cards they need to finish one of their key archetypes or a deck they just really want to play is kind of feels bad. I was really hoping we'd get a little bit of an announcement on the free Series 3 card a month feature, because they did mention a while back they had something planned for that. I don't know if that something planned is just, hey, we're having more series drops, so you might get to use it again, or if they're actually going to do something different with that feature in the future. That remains up in the air, but I do think there is a problem here with bloating in Series 3, and they definitely need to find some kind of way to just make it a little more intuitive, whether that's adding more agency over what you acquire, which would be my preferred option, or just finding a way to speed up the process a bit for people who are new to the game and haven't been playing since the launch or since beta. So yeah, that's all the big news we have today about series drops. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think about these series drops? I think we're going to see a pretty vocal reaction about this from players who probably had different expectations of which cards were going to be dropping, since previously the way they did series drops before they halted them was it was always about prioritizing the cards that had been out the longest. So it started with those initial cards that dropped into Series 4 and Series 5, excluding the big bads, which is a term we haven't heard mentioned in a very long time. And then cards would progressively drop down in order of release. There was very clearly a pattern and system there, and as we can see with these new series drops, the only pattern and system I'm seeing here is that the cards that really aren't the most popular are probably going to be the cards that are dropping down. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.